Hello everyone, this is Tim, and this is going to be part two of Within the Ring of Fire, the Saga book review. And hopefully I won't go into as much detail this time. I'm going to try to speed things up a little bit to get more information included. The next species that we're going to talk about is the ogre. They are aggressive, impulsive, savage, and creatures of pure rage. They tend to be straightforward, and they have a morbid sense of humor. They are extroverts to a fault, and they have an extreme lack of modesty. They live to about 225 cycles, and a cycle is 77 days. I got that a little mixed up in the last video. They are less brutish than outsiders think they are, and they have that sort of reputation, especially to strangers. But they will spill blood for insults of those that they love. So if you insult their mother, expect to be bleeding and spitting out chunks of teeth and gums out of your mouth. Um, they have a clan structure with the strongest male ruling over each of the clans. There are lots of physical sports and games played in the youth, and that tends to weed out the strongest ones that rise to the top. So those that are watching the games can tell which one is probably destined for power and leadership. They are carnivores and often eat those that they kill, especially of other species. They consider it holy to eat the hearts of those that they vanquish in battle, and they think that this is a way of keeping their soul alive within their own bodies, the souls of their victims. They are nearly hairless, they have bright red skin, black nails, and they can be as tall as 8 feet and often weigh over 400 pounds. So they're given the Anders dwarves, um, a run for their money, basically, the Farum, and they wear few clothes, and that goes to that immodest thing again. They do, however, follow, well, some of them follow the tranquil teachings of the Freyan goddess Dazazia, and some of the ogres actually live with the Freyans, but not all of them. There are a group that basically just, yes, they try to not give into their rage as much, but not to this extent that the Freyans, the goddess teaches. So some fear that the Mihangis um, should be exterminated, while others think that they're betters. Pharaohs and ogres tend to get along pretty well. Humans are not to be trusted, and Cathons are the ogre's greatest enemies and food. So they tend to think of a lot of other intelligent species as a nice little walking meal. Mul is their father god, but ogres tend to think of their religion as a personal choice and preference, so many different gods and goddesses are worshipped. Ogres are often forceful in their sexual exploits. They can reproduce with Bayabon Siths, Duke Siths, Pharaohs, Freyans, Kalfars, Mihangis, Satyrs, and Vyagishas. All of the half-breeds are sterile, however. As children, the stronger ones, if not prevented, will eat their weaker siblings. So you need to keep an eye on the children. Most ogres just want a full belly and a place to sleep, and they do not understand wealth or a fair wage, so sometimes they are taken advantage of. Their language is Moolish, and again, a lot of the languages are based on the deity, the creator god or goddess of a specific species, and they have a biological system that causes their lack of self-control and rage called paroxysm, and they do fight against this. They will often begin to eat fallen foes even in the midst of battle, so sometimes they kind of lose their head for this belly lust. I don't know what you want to call it. It's a strong need to feed that hunger. So life threw me a few curveballs, but I'm back a week later trying to finish out this one little video. So we just finished ogres. We're going to go into orcs next. Now, orcs were a big surprise to me. I think that in trying to make them unique, Ander has actually made them into a completely different race who go by the name orc. But if you're expecting the orcs of traditional RPG settings, then you're not really going to find what you're looking for. Orcs live for a very long time, up to 2,000 cycles or more. They have long memories and they tend to be tolerant of others. Again, this is something that you wouldn't expect orcs to have. Their ancestors are very important to them. They tend to be less risky than other species. Again, something that's like an antithesis to the traditional orc. They can be altruistic toward others, and they often share their inner emotions with others around them. So, as you see, it's already very different. They live in villages and they are ruled by a matriarchy. They tend to have obsessive compulsive disorder, and they feel a connection to the soil and to plants. Mostly, they are vegetarians, but they will eat meat on occasion. They absorb some of the sun's light for nourishment. So you're starting to get a little bit of a plant vibe here. Like they're like half ant or something along those lines. They produce nearly no waste, so they're very proficient with absorbing nutrients from the things that they eat. They can survive on very small amounts of food and water, and they basically produce these tendrils that absorb water from the air. And so that's probably the coolest thing I think about this race so far. Just the idea of gotta stick out my tendrils and get something to drink is it's pretty wild. So that's probably my favorite thing about this race so far. They are the first form of sapient life created by the divine beings of the setting. They tend to be around 6 feet 5 inches tall and about 205 pounds. They have gray or greenish brown skin. They have ape-like arms, black, brown, or green beady eyes under prominent brows, thick necks, and they have tusks. The orcs do not trust the Pharaohs, and their greed, Freyan's loyalty to the gods bothers them. They admire the Mihangis for their connection to the trees, but they are basically their enemy. Vayageshes are their greatest enemy. They offer appreciation to the elder creator gods, especially Nathraxu and the 44 trolls, but they do not worship them in the traditional sense. Any orc found worshipping a god is normally exiled. Magic is held as a natural part of the world, though they slaughter warlocks in ritual punishments. Low sex drives and low birth rates is a problem for the race, and they're not as good about getting little ones created, procreated. So again, it's something that's against the norm of the traditional orc. In most settings, the orcs breed like rabbits. The gestation period for a pregnancy lasts 18 cycles, which is very long to the other species compared. They need at least two fathers to procreate, and this is another cool thing. They breed, or they can breed, with dragons, giants, and trolls. And females can produce a musk that drives the male orcs wild with lust. They were created to protect the world. Their language is Thraxa, and there used to be 4 races of them, but now it's just the one. They get bonuses to using wooden weapons, and again, it kind of goes back to that plant sort of vibe. And they have penalty with metal, so armor and weapons, and they get bonuses to resisting spells. Heal twice as fast as those species, tend to be slower, and that's pretty much it. I do like the race, I think, but maybe if it, I think I would like it more if it wasn't called orc. If it was called like, I don't know, some just gibberish fantasy, like random name from a random name generator kind of race. I don't know. It's just that orc thing just bugs me a little bit, but the race itself is actually really cool. So it does some different things. I like that. Again, tendrils and 2 fathers to procreate. It's pretty cool. So sirens are next, and they're also called storm sharks. I like the actually a lot of the. I think I made a comment in the last video about art that you know is what it is, but the race illustrations I think are really cool. They show you pretty much what the Andrew's describing in text. They seem to be pretty close to the description, which is cool. Sometimes when you read an RPG, the art is there and it almost feels like it was tacked on later, and sometimes it doesn't actually fit the description. But in this case, it seems like every race fits the words that are on the page, which is cool. These sirens are kleptomaniacs. They're known as pirates and thieves. Males fight and compete with each other often, especially when the females are up for grabs. They view themselves as superior to all other species. Their culture is a meritocracy and theocracy. And conservative religious types versus secular progressive types is a theme that's in their culture. Omnivores that favor meat, especially fish and shellfish, and their favorite food is dolphin and then jellyfish. So, you're picturing this race swooping down and attacking things in the water to, fill their bellies. They have shark-like, teeth, humanoid faces. So they're sort of like pulled back and stretched forward. Long feathers growing from their heads. Males have less feathers, and they're longer, and those are the more attractive ones apparently. They have blue skin with gills on their neck. So again, it's sort of this weird combination of shark and flying things with a humanoid appearance as well. And they have black or yellow scaled taloned feet. So they're kind of a nice little combination race. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. They lay eggs, but they also nurse their young. So it sort of throws a little wrench in the whole, like, like birds don't have breasts, but these ones do. So you have, a little bit of these like flying winged shark things with breasts. So, at least the females. So it's cool. It's a little different. They have a few problems with the mainland species. They mainly just they don't interact too much with them, so they don't really have that many problems. They charge heavy tolls for ships traveling through their lands, and they look down on those who dwell on islands and walk around on the ground. Basically, just anything without wings. Most worship Fatash faithfully. Leviathan is also worshipped. Some worship Igvale, and a few worship other lesser gods. Ritual drowning is the penalty for the use of magic, and that sounds pretty awful. They view themselves as the chosen people of the world. They cannot mate with other species, so they have to mate with their own. Typical family unit is 2 females, and that's to 1 male, so that's a little bit of a different ratio there. And males tend to have many scars from all the courtship battles to try to get the ladies to come check them out. They're created from the tail feathers of a thunderbird, the dorsal fin of a shark, and the crest of a high wave, and the wind trapped in a conch shell. And once again, I'm really impressed with all of the mythology that Ander has weaved into little descriptions like this all throughout the book. It really is the strength of this game. You can really tell that Ander has spent some time researching and learning about various mythologies, religions, etc., gods, old and new, and he's weaved them with his own, handwriting. It's really great. It's interesting to see that in here, and again, I'm looking forward to reviewing 77 Thrones. Their language is Phatashan. They can breathe air and water, and they take damage if they can't submerge themselves in water once a day. Now, this is something that's interesting because you wouldn't expect a flying race to have that sort of penalty, but again, they have that shark sort of nature in there. Sharks do not attack them. I guess they can kind of sense that there's something going on. That they should just stay away. It's sort of a kinship. Um, that's interesting because it made me think that of like real world sharks and like a feeding frenzy, how they chew into each other. So they're sort of above that. So it seems like there's some sort of like hierarchy there that the sharks can sense that they're betters and they should stay away. At least that's my take on it. And they have a high tolerance for sonic damage, and they have a sonic singing attack. So he's sort of bringing in like the banshee flavor there, which is mix that with something that can fly, and that's pretty nasty. And they are vulnerable to cold. Okay, I want to end this video with the last species in the Saga book. It's one of the main ones, the Vayagish. They tend to be rigid and stubborn. They place a high value on the words of their philosophers. They really look to build a sense of conformity and obedience in all those in the society. They obey those greater than themselves with honor and respect. They are a militaristic, martial people, and they greatly prize taking trophies from defeated opponents. And I'm sure some of those can get kind of gruesome and nasty from time to time. They have a patriarchal clan structure, and there are 9 main houses that remain out of the 10 original ones. Their empire is ruled by a senate of 81 male Vayagishes, and there's 9 from each house. Their great academy teaches all the clan-born male children, but the peasants and lower classes are left to fend for themselves. each of the houses has interesting details about it, and some of the other races as well have like various like not really sub races, but little divisions that are listed in the race description, species description that are interesting, full of flavor, and it probably is too much detail to include in a video, but those were fun to read through, and it made me think if I was going to be a character for one of those races, I'd have a tough time picking between some of these cool options. Something to try to role play out and see how it would work. So those are neat. Liquids are poisonous to them, and this is one of the things that's the coolest thing about this race. That sounds so difficult, It's a nice flaw that's built in there, and a lot of these species have flaws in them. They consume meat and drink fire. Again, something that's kind of hard to wrap your brain around, but it's cool for a fantasy setting because you get to try to imagine what that's actually like. Does it burn your throat? Does it burn your nose and nostrils as you're sucking down that fire? But for them, I'm guessing it doesn't. It's probably akin to like taking a drag on a cigarette. They used to eat other species, but that has become a great taboo. So I'm guessing there's probably some of them out there that are still doing that. They're living by the old ways. They run flames over themselves to clean. So instead of washing, because again they can't use liquids, they have to use fire. I would also think that maybe like using sand would be good. Okay. They have pale yellow skin, pointed ears. They have no nose, and this is probably the most cool aspect of their physical appearance. It's very striking, especially in the art when it's just that like nose hole in the center of their face. So that's a very cool thing that Andrew chose to do there. It's something that it's very easy to describe, and when you see the pictures, it's very memorable. So again, this is a very cool race. A lot of unique flavor in these races and species that he's come up with. They have claws. They're 6 feet, 4 inches tall on average, and they're lean. They ascribe no value to metals or wood. They do um, basically appreciate steel the most, however, and they're the makers of steel. They tend to barter and trade, and pheroms are viewed with contempt, but they're considered excellent slaves, so they have some value to them. They have close relationship with Freyans. Ogres and Mihangis are slaughtered on sight. Many ogres are their slaves, as they have lost every battle against the Vaegishus. And hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. So lots of ogres have gone down in fights and ended up as slaves. They laugh at orcs as antiquated bygones, and they find humanity troubling as possibly something that could challenge them in the future. They mainly worship Hob Apophis, Morgul, and Tahul. Others worship Golgith, who has many names, which is a cool name for a god. Helena, Irothquat, Olis, Zancero, and Zost. And those are kind of fun to say, but tough. They look at the making of steel as a high art form. They often have twins. They believe in arranged marriages, especially for nobles. And they're only allowed to have one wife, but they have many concubines. Hob Apophis, uh, this is the creation story, captured wandering goblins after the Shadow Purge, and that's the fiction at the beginning of the Saga book, and turned them into a new species via the Soul Forge. He trapped within these vessels red hot steel, and they're called Hobbs goblins. So this is the first time when you're reading through these descriptions here, you're like, oh, these are hobgoblins, and that's neat because up to this point it just felt like a completely different race, and it is. And Andrew has taken these traditional RPG tropes and twisted them, turned them, and made them into his own creations. So again, Andrew, very well done. A lot of these races are interesting and cool, and I look forward to reading more. I know there's more in the Monsters and Men book, and I think some of the other books as well. They speak both the language of Morgul and Tahul, and they're both considered sacred. There are 9 surnames that go along with the 9 noble houses, as along with the surname of the 10th house that does not exist, but they don't speak that very much, I don't think, anymore. The common folk do not have surnames. They can see far in the darkness. They have a tolerance to fire. They're good at hiding, and they have natural ability to, of course, craft steel. And their bodies contain no water. So it's interesting. I wonder if they, what replaces water. It's a fantasy thing, so it doesn't have to make all kinds of logical sense to it. But you wonder like what's in their blood. How does blood work with them? So that'd be cool to find out, Andrew, if you get this far in the video. And they are not taught to use weapons from other houses, so they specialize in the weapon of their forebears. If they're submerged in water, they have a chance to be paralyzed, and if they get a little bit wet, they can be slowed down. They have a disdain for ships, and they have a severe aversion to water. And if they are ever submerged in it, they will more than likely die. So that'll be the end of this video. Hopefully I'll get into more detail, I guess, if that's a good thing. I have a tendency to put too much stuff in my review videos, so if you made it this far, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.